In 2014, when the Maidan coup happened, because I can't call it a revolution, those people that were aware of colored revolutions historically knew exactly what was going on. We knew exactly who needs this sort of a movement and who is standing behind this sort of a movement. But this short intro of a video is not about politics. This short intro and the interview that will follow is more about feelings. And what I felt in 2014 is I realized that no matter how far and for how long you are absent from the land that you were born on, you sort of get this metaphysical feeling, this longing that something is going on. It's like a warning sign, warning bells that ring off in your head that something is happening to your people and your land. And it's this internal anxiety. And this internal anxiety only grew stronger in 2022 when the conflict grew into an international scale. And for the first couple of weeks, I didn't know what was happening with me internally. I was ready to pack my bags. I couldn't sleep at night. I was internally fighting myself, trying to, my inner critic was telling me, you're not a man, you need to go, you need to help. Even though, again, I knew what was going on, but this strong yearning to be helpful was so present. So in the first couple of days, I sat down, I wrote 3 songs to kind of get my feelings out. And then this idea came to my head that I wanted to find a person from Donbass that could relate to us Western Ukrainians and us in America. Their personal story could sincerely tell us what they have lived through. I wanted to find someone that possibly doesn't yet have anger and hatred towards the Ukrainian side or American side. And I don't know, call it divine intervention. One day on YouTube, this video pops up of this young man. He spoke pure Ukrainian, like better than we do in Western Ukraine. And this guy would spend endless hours throughout the day, 10, 11, 12 hours, trying to communicate with Western Ukrainians, trying to relate to them that, look, we are one people. Please hear my story. Please realize that you may have been lied to. And I was so overtaken. I was like, wow, the thoughts that I had, the person that I envisioned actually exists. So I wrote to him a comment, and I didn't have the Ukrainian or Russian keyboard, so I wrote in English letters, but Ukrainian. And I think he replied to me, he said something, but we lost communication. And in the past 2 years, this young man has grown into one of the biggest Russian/Ukrainian YouTubers on the front lines of information, if you will. And 2 years later, he finally agreed to sit down with me for an interview. So just like this little intro, and just like I mentioned before, this interview is not about politics. This interview is a story of someone that has survived the terrible war and conflict since 2014. This is his first-hand account of what happened. So to everyone that's going to watch it, I translated the video myself. It's almost as literal as it can get. I just want you to have an open heart when you watch this, and just realize that it's not about this man being a YouTuber or a political activist. It's his personal story and atrocities that he had to face since 2014. So I wish that all of you enjoy this because it has been a long time coming. Thank you for your attention.
Good afternoon. You are on Prove to Me that You're Live podcast. Today, I have a guest. Andrei, if you don't mind, I would like to make a little intro. 2 years ago, I had an idea to find a person from Donbass and who could tell all of us, Ukrainian speaking people and people in America, to tell us what exactly they have survived. And I got so lucky to find Andrey Gorlovsky. We call it in English divine intervention. When I found Andrey, the biggest thing that I liked about him, that I seen that he was sincere and he was spending his personal time to bring to people his own truth and open eyes of people in Western Ukraine and us in America to tell us things that maybe we don't see and maybe mass media doesn't bring. And in 2 years now, Andrey Horivsky agreed to sit down with us. So good afternoon, Andrey. Hey, how you doing? Andrey, thank you so much. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from?
Я понял.
I
Да,
got you.
меня зовут Андрей.
My name is Andrei,
Я прожил
and I was born and raised in Horlivka practically my whole life.
из города выезжал
I left out of the city, but I left for a little bit,
летом. Съездил в
to
гости.
go on vacation or go visit some
Тем не
people.
менее,
But
прожил
practically my whole life, I've been in Horlivka.
потом, когда началась
And then
война
after
на
the war
Донбассе,
started in
я уехал
Donbass,
и
for the
17-18 год
first remaining time, I was in Horlivka, but in 2017 and 2018, there
поехал
were no
я
jobs
в
around, so I
Москву.
left
Меня там
to Moscow. I got invited to work. I was working there,
из Москвы
and then after Moscow, I went to Crimea.
понравилось.
I really liked it,
Вернулся
but
назад
then I went
в
back to Donbass, to
Донбасс
Horlivka,
пожил, ну, периодически приезжал и
and I
сейчас
lived there,
нахожусь в Крыму.
and now I am in
Учился
Crimea.
не очень
I studied
хорошо,
not so well in school,
был техникум у меня,
but then I went to secondary school.
прикладная математика.
Math I studied. I
Учился
didn't really study that well, but then I went into institute, I mean university, for the same profession, but I didn't study that well.
в это же время
And then I worked
понял, что
because
скажем так, родители не могли
my
заплатить
parents
мне
couldn't afford.
школу. То есть мне сразу сказали, хочешь
They told me right away, if you want
зарабатывать
to study in higher education, you're gonna have to help us.
И я пошел
So I
учиться
went to work and studied part time.
там
I worked everywhere,
грузчиком,
from warehouse stockpiling, and I ran a little store.
ну, в принципе, и все.
Well, basically, that's it. Thank you. Could you please take us back to your childhood? Do you remember the Soviet Union?
Я родился в
No,
90-м
I
году.
was born in 1990.
Я
So,
это свидетельство о рождении у меня Советского
in
Союза.
I have the birth certificate as Soviet Union, but I don't remember the
Я
Soviet
застал
Union.
тяжелые 90-е,
I remember the terrible 90s when
родители, то есть отец где-то постоянно в
my
командировках
dad
находился.
was always traveling abroad for
Вот, и
work
уезжал, чтобы заработать
to make
денежек.
some money. because there was two of us, me and my brother.
Бабушка у меня в деревне,
My grandma lived in the
откуда
village
мама, и мама
where my mom was
постоянно
from, and
ездила
my mom used to always go
возчиком,
there
покупали
to
яйца
get
и продавали молоко
milk,
в город.
and she would bring it
Ну и
back to the
ходили,
city to sell
в общем,
milk, eggs,
крутились потихоньку. Я помню,
basically
с
hustling.
мамой ездил вот эти
I remember I
сухие
used to go
железные
with my mom
на
with the super
электричках
heavy
и
bags,
на
taking
попутках добирались
little
домой
trains
и
and
обратно также.
hitchhiking.
Вот. Ну, то есть Советского Союза я не помню ничего,
Well,
помню
Soviet Union,
то
I
время,
don't remember,
когда
but I do remember
лучшая игрушка
when the
это
best toy
палочка,
was a stick
найденная на улице.
that we found on a
Грубо
street.
говоря так.
Yeah, basically.
Всі то
Yeah,
пам'ятають.
basically, we remember all of that.
Ти був з братом.
You were with your brother.
Хочеш відповідати?
Can you please, if you want or don't want to answer, but on your streams, you used to say that your dad is Ukrainian or mom is Ukrainian. I don't remember. Well, in my birth certificate, it says my dad is Russian and my mom is Ukrainian. Do you know your roots of your family? Like your mom's or your dad's? Well, my mom's not too much because my mom is from the village and not really. My grandpa, I remember, may he rest in peace, but how can I say this? When I grew up until an age, and then I found out that he's not really my grandpa, but I always thought of him as my own. I mean, even when I found out that he's not blood, didn't change anything because he loved me and I loved him. But from my dad's side, most of my relatives I know because we had this tradition when the Red Hill, we all get together in the cemetery, all of us, and we would meet all of our relatives, and it's a lot of them. And every year we would gather, and every year I would find out some new family members. Yeah, so you would gather at the cemetery. Yeah, so we would get at the cemetery and then we would go to someone's house. So there are a lot of family members. And then after the war started, I also found out that I have relatives in Moscow. I have an uncle there, a grandpa. I saw them when I was there. And I went over there. My dad told me, you know, you have relatives over there. And, well, my uncle took me in. And then I didn't see my grandpa. But then I went to see my grandpa. And I never met him before. So I met him. And he's an older man. And he's still working. And he's an engineer. So he has this pile of papers with drawings on it. And I asked him, what is it? He said, well, this is my work. So my grandpa, I don't know, he has interest about our roots. He actually did the whole family tree with our families and last names. He likes to do that stuff, like the whole history of our family. So he told me about our family members that I heard about, but I never met. So I remember my great grandma. I saw her once. So he told me a story about her. So he knows, but I don't know much about my roots. And I never dug deep into. So how much do you know about your mom? You said she was from the village. Is it Donetsk Oblast? Yeah. So I have this interesting question. How did they know if they were Russian or Ukrainian? Like, for example, if they were from Western Ukraine and they moved to Donbass, they would know. But how did they know in Donbass region who's Ukrainian, who's Russian? Well, as far as I know, uh, back in the day, they used to ask people when the whole, idea appeared of nationalities. It appeared not too long ago. So they used to ask people. So nationality, well, it's all about how you feel. Well, yeah, the idea of nationality appeared like 100 years ago. Yeah, yeah, there you go. And especially those territories where nationalities they intertwine. So Donbass, there's a lot of Russians and a lot of Ukrainians. So in Ukraine, people feel like they're Ukrainian, but to me, we're one people. So I was raised the same way. Yeah, and that's why I'm asking you. It's so interesting. How do people know? But basically, you explained that they would ask them verbally and they would just answer. Well, yeah, maybe someone knew their roots. Maybe maybe everybody's Russian, but people don't really know. And they don't know because they don't want to know. They don't know because of certain circumstances, because people moved and migrations and information gets lost. So people don't know about their roots, their far roots. So basically, it's all about how you feel. Well, that's how it used to be. So I lived in Ukraine. So Ukrainian in the Ukrainian language, it means nationality and citizenship. So in Russia, it's different. In Russia, there's a Russian citizen and then there's a Russian nationality. But then there's also an understanding of a Russian that is a broad understanding. Well, you can remember Uzbek people saying I'm Russian or Tartarian people saying I'm Russian. You understand what I'm saying? So in Russia, it's a whole different ball game. In Ukraine, it's Ukrainian and Russian. Well, the way I was raised is I didn't see a difference. I had family in Russia, and I didn't see a difference when we met. We spoke one language. Even when someone spoke Ukrainian, well, practically everyone spoke Russian in my close family. But Russians that live close to Ukraine, they understand Ukrainian. Maybe not all of it, but they understand. The languages are very similar. But to understand, we understand one another, but habits are the same. Mentality is practically the same. Well, the reason I'm asking you is it's interesting to me. When you were little, did you ever even think about these questions? No. Well, what I'm trying to say is, at your household, did the question ever arise? All right, that's wonderful. I remember that you told me that you went to Ukrainian class. Yeah, Ukrainian class. So we had a school, 4 classes, parallel classes, 3 in Russian and 1 in Ukrainian. So my parents always asked me, even when I went to kindergarten, you want to go to kindergarten? Well, there was an opportunity. My mom was at home. So, but she used to either go to the village or she didn't have time. So she asked me, do you want to go to the kindergarten? So she asked me, do you want to go? I said no. So they didn't send me. But my great grandma taught me everything. Like, how to multiply, and
Вот, поэтому
she taught me
все-таки
really well.
все-таки
So I didn't go to
большинство
kindergarten, but when I went to
все-таки,
school, they
если мы
asked
говорим
me,
про
do you have two
русскоговорящий или
options,
русскоязычный
a
класс,
Russian
либо
speaking class or a
англоязычный?
Ukrainian speaking
Я
class?
спросил, как бы, в чем
So I
разница.
asked them, what's the
И мне
difference?
объяснили, что
So
дело в
they
том,
explained
что
to me, we live
государственный
in
язык наш
Ukraine.
один, а государственный язык все-таки украинский.
The country is
Вот.
Ukraine and the
Все
language is
соблюдают язык.
Ukrainian, but
Но
we speak
документы,
Russian.
и там в случае, если придется
But
заполнять
if
там
you will have to
формальности,
fill out
то,
certain papers in
скорее
your
всего,
life, most
все
likely
может быть, что
it will be in
придется
Ukrainian.
заполнять на украинском. Либо куда-то поедешь в другие регионы,
Or maybe
где,
you're going to go to
ну,
different regions
украиноязычный
that
язык.
speak Ukrainian.
Вот. Я сказал, пойду в
So I
украинский
said,
класс,
okay,
буду
I'm
учить
going to go to
украинский.
Ukrainian class.
І ти, як
And
ще
you,
малий Андрій,
when you were
ти
little
якось
Andrei,
собі рішив так,
so you
я хочу
decided for yourself that I want to go to
Ну,
Ukrainian
потому
class.
что,
Well, because,
как бы это сказать,
how should I say this?
больше знаний, больше
More
возможностей
information, more opportunity.
пригодится, Божьим в жизни.
So I
То, что в жизни
thought
может
that
пригодиться,
I might use it in life.
а як тобі, от,
So how
може, ти можеш згадати, як тобі було вчитися в українському класі?
how did you study in
Воно
Ukrainian
зразу
class?
якось прийшло, чи
Did it feel
ти
natural to
почав
you,
розуміти, що може мені то не
or
подобається,
maybe you
або
decided that you made the wrong decision, that you don't like
нет,
it?
абсолютно.
No, no, absolutely
Знаете, я
not.
вообще
When we were
начинал,
kids, we never
именно первые классы
thought
учить
about these kind of things. First grade,
по-настоящему так же с ребятами
we
из первого класса.
spoke to everybody that was in parallel classes
Ну, даже не было никаких
in Russian or Ukrainian. We never even thought about this subject. No, okay, so there's Ukrainian. Well, in other classes they had Ukrainian,
У нас в чем отличие были все
but the
предметы.
difference that in my class all the subjects were in Ukrainian. That's the whole difference.
Там тоже изучали украинский.
So in other classes they studied Ukrainian too, no
ти
problem.
підлітком у
Well,
вас
when you were
в подвір'ї,
a teenager in your neighborhood, did a question ever arise that a derogative Ukrainian word, Zapadan, because I remember in my region in Western Ukraine, we were joking at Russians like, hey, look at that Moskal, but we didn't mean it as from hatred. But we had that. Did you have that in Donbass? When I was a teenager, not really.
Либо я мог приехать, да, либо компания какая-то из
But
России.
if I ever went to Russia or anybody came from Russia, we used to call each other like, or call me Chachol, but I never took it personally, or if anybody said Moskal or Katsap, we never thought about it as derogative. Well, the reason that I ask is because I really don't know. Because a lot of people in Western Ukraine don't know. But when you were a teenager, a question such as Zapadanets, a Westerner, Ukrainian, did that word even arise in your
Я сейчас
circle?
не припомню.
I really don't remember.
Общался
I remember I
с людьми,
talked
родственники,
to
ну, точнее, не
relatives
родственники, соседей, вот,
of my
возрастного
neighbors
возраста,
from Western Ukraine
из Западной Украины, да, обычные люди,
and just
обычные,
regular
ну,
people.
без всяких.
Ну, таке питання не піднімалось. Ну,
So a
добре,
question
бо
like that never arose
наприклад,
because
я
Я
знаю,
просто не помню. Может,
maybe I
поднималось,
don't
но
remember.
я не
Maybe
вспомню.
something, but I don't remember.
я знаю,
Well,
що твоє інтерв'ю, я просто туди встав.
I know it's your interview, but I will just say this,
Людей вже довго, так по чуть-чуть.
that people were brainwashed already back then because we had such understandings as, oh, he's from Eastern Ukraine. So we had that. So that's why it's interesting if you guys had that.